All right, today we're jumping into a really powerful piece of writing, the chapter called We Agnostics. This was written specifically for the skeptic by people who used to be skeptics themselves. So we're going to deconstruct its core argument step by step and see how it all works. So the whole thing kicks off with a question that, let's be honest, probably all of us have faced. You've tried everything you can think of. You've used logic, you've read philosophy, you've tried self-help, sheer grit, and you still hit a dead end. What happens when your own best thinking, your strongest willpower, just completely runs out of gas? And this is what the text really zeroes in on as the core problem. It says, for some of the deepest issues we face, just having a good moral code or a better philosophy on life, well, it's not enough. It just doesn't give you the power you need to actually change. You can will yourself to be different with every fiber of your being, but the horsepower just isn't there.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The problem isn't framed as a moral failing, it's framed as a power outage. And the argument is, once your own personal power grid has totally failed, the only logical solution is to tap into a new power source, one that, by definition, has to be greater than you are.
But of course, that idea immediately throws up a huge wall for anyone who calls themselves an atheist or an agnostic. The solution sounds like the one thing they feel they are totally incapable of accepting. It feels like you're being presented with an impossible choice. And wow, this really lays out just how stark that choice is. On one side, you have what the text calls alcoholic death, which is really a metaphor for being completely defeated by your problem. And on the other, a spiritual life. The authors even admit that when you put it like that, a skeptic's face falls. It's like being asked to choose between jumping into a fire or a flood. But here's where the approach gets so effective. It doesn't judge. It doesn't wag a finger. Instead, it comes right alongside the skeptic and says, hey, we get it. We've been there. We had those exact same doubts, the same prejudices, the same feelings about religion. And creating that sense of empathy is absolutely crucial for what they're about to propose.
So that empathy, that's the key that unlocks the whole argument. Instead of asking the skeptic to completely abandon their worldview, the text does something much smarter. It redefines the terms. It offers a path forward that doesn't force you to throw away your intellectual honesty.
And this is the game-changing idea, right here. The text says it plain as day. When, therefore, we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. This completely takes all the dogma and doctrine right off the table. The power you're looking for doesn't have to be anybody else's idea of God. It just has to be a power that's greater than you. And to make it even more accessible, it basically offers a menu of options. You don't have to believe in some old man with a beard in the sky. Can you maybe entertain the idea of a creative intelligence, or a spirit of the universe? Or, hey, what about this one, the great reality deep down inside of you? The whole point is to find some concept, no matter how small, that you can work with. So here's the bottom line. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't need a perfect definition. You don't have to fully comprehend it. The only ticket you need to get in the door is to just lay your prejudice aside for a minute and be willing to believe that some kind of power greater than you might exist. That's it. The bar is set at simple willingness. Now, the authors knew that for the modern skeptical mind, that might still not be enough. So what do next? They build a logical case for making this leap. They appeal directly to the skeptic's love of reason, and they argue that it's actually more logical to have a little faith than to have none at all. They ask this really fascinating question. I mean, think about it. We easily accept all kinds of scientific theories about invisible forces we can't really see or fully understand, right? Like electricity or the atom. We accept them because we can see the results. They work. So the text asks, why do we get so hung up when that same kind of thinking is applied to our inner lives? And they make a really cool historical point. Back in ancient times, people were brilliant, but progress was painfully slow because they were chained to old, fixed ideas. Today, our greatest strength is our readiness to toss out an old theory the second a new one comes along that works better. We've become incredibly open-minded, at least about the world around us. And this is just such a perfect analogy. The Wright brothers, their success wasn't just about the math and the engineering. The real engine behind their flight was this almost childish faith that they could build a machine that would fly, even when everybody else knew it was impossible. The faith came before they had the proof. And that's where the logic all comes together. If we're willing to be open-minded enough to invent flight,
to explore the atom, to harness electricity, why on earth wouldn't we apply that same open-mindedness to solving our own most painful and destructive human problems?
So all of this, clearing away the prejudice, building the logical case, it all funnels down to one single, practical, and surprisingly simple question. That's the whole thing, right there. And notice the two parts. First, do I now believe? But if that's still too big a jump, there's the second part. Or am I even willing to believe? The door is held open as wide as it can possibly be. All you need to bring to the table is just a tiny spark of willingness.
And the promise that comes with this is immediate. And it's powerful. The text says that the very moment a person can honestly answer yes to that question, they're on their way. That simple yes becomes the cornerstone that a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built on. The journey has officially begun.
And we're not talking about small adjustments here. This chart kind of maps out the journey they describe. You start at total failure, that place where your own willpower is completely exhausted. But that simple yes leads you to finding new power, peace, and happiness, and eventually a revolutionary change in your entire way of thinking and living. So we can leave it with this thought. The whole argument suggests that maybe, for the skeptic, the real goal isn't to suddenly arrive at some perfect, fully formed belief. Maybe the most important step of all isn't belief itself, but simply the willingness to begin.